Hi, my name's Erin. I'll just dive right in here. So, Chapter 1 question. How have recent historical events affected the course of research in organizational psychology? I think it's pretty straightforward. Any historical events that happen can have a drastic effect on how we look at things within an organization. The first thing or main thing that comes to mind would be the election of President Barack Obama into office. I think having our first African American president was pretty major for everyone in this country, especially in regards to organizations and how they would be run. I think, particularly in regards to making sure that there's more equality present in the workplace. I think a lot of organizations would also want to make sure that diversity is embedded and part of their culture, and just being much more aware of race, diversity, and equality in the workplace, I think would be the main effect of that. And it is something that industrial organizational psychologists have had to adjust to. Moving on to Chapter 3, describe the socialization process for graduate students in your program. So the socialization process at Liberty University started with me viewing the website. I could immediately tell that there was a huge focus on Christianity as part of the culture at Liberty University. I was able to gain access into some of the campus life, even though I am an online student. But all those things were really impactful for me just to see, the integration of the campus life into my own coursework being an online student. From there, I spoke with somebody from admissions. They were super helpful and really nice, and honestly nicer than most of the other schools I looked at. So that was definitely part of my motivation for continuing to look into going to Liberty. Beyond that, they gave me some steps and just some tips on how to enroll and kind of get started within the program, and how to apply and get accepted and all of that. Once classes were about to begin, we were sent some automated emails from admissions just giving us general information, which was great. Then we were also emailed by the professors. All of my other professors sent us great welcome emails with instructions on how the class would be operated and how that would work, which was super helpful and honestly made me feel a lot more comfortable kind of diving into things within the program. They also sent out some different emails about webinars on how to access Blackboard and how that would work as well, which I did actually use one of them. It's been a while since I was in school, so Blackboard was a little tricky for me initially, but I was able to navigate it by taking a look at the webinar and using that as well. Once classes did start and we saw the emails from our professors, we were then prompted to introduce ourselves on a discussion board, which is a great way to just kind of feel more comfortable with the people that we're going to be in school with. There were just some typical icebreakers, information like where we're from, where we live, what program we're in, what we do for work, hobbies, that kind of thing. But that definitely, again, helped me to feel a little bit more comfortable with the group that I was with. And I saw there were some people in my area, so that was kind of interesting. So I think that helped quite a bit. Overall at Liberty, my professors and the process, I feel comfortable. I feel like I have no interest or desire to leave the program. It has been really great so far. So I do feel like overall they were effective at socializing me. And there's definitely a little bit of a learning curve there, or a curve, I should say, not a learning curve, just a little bit of a disadvantage because I am doing an online program. So I think socialization is probably just a little bit more challenging with that. As we're not face to face, it's difficult to have as much social interaction or human interaction as we would normally have being on campus. So that is something, it's a little bit of a disadvantage for me being an online student, but I think overall, Liberty did a great job of socializing me and making me feel comfortable with the program and how that would work. In terms of job embeddedness, I assume that to mean that like whether I'm going to leave the actual program or not. Again, I don't have any desire to do that. So I do feel like overall their process of socialization was successful. Moving on to Chapter 4, how can an organization reduce or prevent work-family conflict? So this is something that I unfortunately have had a lot of experience with, where I used to work prior to the position I'm in now. I really didn't have any life outside of work. They were very clear that while the service we were providing was very family oriented, our work and our job was not to be family oriented. We worked very long hours, 6 days a week. It was a very high pressure job, and mention of outside life besides work was kind of discouraged. So it was a very tough position to withstand long term, which was eventually why I left. But it is something that I'm very familiar with, and I'm very passionate about it as well. Um, I think an organization can do a lot to prevent the strain from work family conflict. Primarily, I think the biggest thing is communication from the employer, and that comes from the top all the way down. I think if the organization themselves would like there to be a focus for their employees on family and on outside life, outside of work, I think that's just something that really needs to be communicated. The company that I'm with now, they do a really great job communicating that they are a family oriented company. They're still family owned, still privately owned. My boss mentions all the time that we work to live and provide for our families and enjoy our lives. We don't live to work. My other company, that was just not the case. So I think communicating those things are really important and impactful. And then I also think a level of flexibility there. So if you've got a son who's going to go to has a soccer game, I think your job should be flexible and let you leave a little early to make it to your kid's soccer game. Again, the current position I have, we're very understanding of that, and I think that it's really important. And it's something that has really allowed me to enjoy that job and that company quite a bit. Just that flexibility and feeling that support from them, and we do feel it all the way from the top down. I do think that is another big piece would be supervisor support. If the organization up here feels like they support family life and support work or life outside of work, that's great. But if it isn't reflected with the direct supervisors of the group, that can be a little bit challenging as well. So I do think that making sure that communication is seamless from the top down to the supervisors for each group is going to be really important. And then aside from that, and this is just kind of um, actions speak louder than words. I would say offer benefits that are very family oriented. Offer, excuse me, offer longer maternity leave, longer paternity leave, or offer paternity leave. Um, Offer discounts or sponsored fitness club memberships for the whole family, not just the individual. Offer counseling reimbursement, family counseling, and those things come up, and it's really important. And unfortunately, counseling can be extremely expensive and a huge financial burden, but it is something that may be necessary in a family, especially with children. So, I think just having those things in place and making the employees aware of that when they first start so that they can take advantage of those benefits is another way of just showing the support for life outside of work and family, which again, it's really important, especially with increased technology and really it being so difficult to disconnect from work when you leave work now with email and cell phones and everything. This focus on family is huge and it is really important. And I think it can help a company to really stand apart from some others. Moving on to chapter 5. This is around developing a performance assessment program for employee development. So performance assessment, reading through this chapter, I was intrigued. I didn't realize how many levels there were to that, and I think I at times had confused effectiveness and efficiency with performance. But I feel a lot more confident now in that in that that is not the case. Job performance is very separate from those things. I think I would want to make sure if I was going to hand out a performance assessment, I would want to make sure to include questions around in-role task-oriented behaviors. So those are really like the technical behaviors. I think the example in the book is a nurse, for example. She has to be able to draw blood effectively. She has to be able to administer medication. I would think an EMT, we would have to know how to drive an ambulance. These technical based skills. That is something that I would make sure to have some questions around or be able to assess those in-role task-oriented questions and behaviors. And then I would also want to include some questions or a way to assess extra role non-technical behaviors. So that's going to be like interpersonal communication, any interaction that you have with another individual in the workplace. Those are extremely important. While they're not technical tasks that you may have to perform, they will undoubtedly happen and they are important and they are a part of the job performance as a whole. Um, I would also include behavior outside of work. This is that was something that was a little enlightening for me. I didn't expect to see that, but behavior outside of work, when I thought about it, it makes perfect sense. If you have a substance abuse problem or you're engaging in illegal activity outside of work, I mean, that could drastically affect whether you can make it to work the next day. And if you do make it to work the next day, it can drastically affect your ability to perform in your role. So super important. Um, and then the last thing would just be another extra role would just be dangerous and hazardous behaviors. Again, kind of the same concept as outside of work behavior, but just making sure that the employees are safe outside of work. I mean, that's going to be really important for making sure that they show up and they're capable of performing their role the next day. So those are all the dimensions that I would make sure to include in an assessment, and it is related to Murphy's order as well. Moving on to chapter 6, what are some possible common organizational constraints? How could they lead to counterproductive behaviors? This is another one. I've had really great leaders in my life, and I've also had really not so great leaders in my life. So this is another one that is really impactful and important for me. Not that all organizational constraints are leader based, but the ones that I selected were related to that. So the one that immediately comes to mind for me is abusive supervision. What this means is they're condescending, disrespectful, overly critical, may take credit for something the subordinate is doing. I think it's kind of common sense as to why that could produce some counterproductive behaviors, but ultimately, it can lead to reduced job satisfaction, higher potential of leaving the company, and I think just a little bit of a psychological effect. I would have to imagine there's going to be some sort of effect or impact that's negative mentally on that employee. It is very frustrating, and it can make you feel all kinds of negativity about yourself, which really isn't fair, and it's not good. So ultimately, that type of behavior coming from the leader can lead to someone potentially leaving, or again, just the counterproductive behavior.